Well, welcome to another episode of My Solopreneur Life with yours truly, Terry Pappy, behind the microphone. And today I actually have a guest. Yes, my first guest in this season. And her name is Miriam Schulman. And she is the author of and basically business owner behind Artpreneur. And her book is called Artpreneur, the step-by-step guide to making a sustainable living from your creativity. Now, I wish I had this book when I was trying to sell my art online because I certainly did not do very well with it. But I have such a successful business with Better 3 that the art stuff kind of always took a back seat, which is okay because it's more of a hobby for me anyway. And I love business and I love helping people get their business communications in line. And so the conversation I have with Miriam is about how she got started, and she goes into some pretty good detail and has some teaching moments about what she has in her programs, as well as what she helps other solopreneurs and people who are selling their creativity in particular are doing, that she can help them be successful and sell their art and be creative and make a good living. So we have a fun conversation. And one of the things that I like that she went into was about getting help. And it's not something that I've talked about yet in this season, but for a solopreneur to get it all done, sometimes you got to get help, and that can run the gamut. So I will be covering that in future episodes and maybe even dedicate a season to it. But Miriam was great in giving some good advice and some good tips on how you can approach bringing someone in, or more than one person. She has 5 on her team, believe it or not. And she's obviously been very successful. And I think we have a great conversation. So I hope you enjoy it too. Welcome to My Solopreneur Life. I'm Terry Pappy, your gracious host, and I am so glad you're here. I have a wonderful episode for you. Sit back, relax, and let's have some real talk about what it is to be a solopreneur. Well, welcome, Miriam. I'm so happy to have you on My Solopreneur Life. This is actually my first guest for this particular season, which is on the hidden realities of being a solopreneur. And I've covered a lot of topics because, boy, do I love to show my soft underbelly when it comes to being a solopreneur. So thank you for being guest number 1 in this season. And I'd like to welcome you and just have you talk to my listener about who you are, where you're based out of, and what your business is.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Terry. I'm definitely have come prepared, willing to spill the tea about being a solopreneur. So I left corporate in the wake of 9/11. I was working on Wall Street. I was there when the first Trade Center was bombed back in 93. So when 9/11 happened, I knew I couldn't go back to that world. And that's when I decided I was going to make my own business. I didn't know at first that it would be an artist. At first, I started a job as a Pilates instructor. I thought that would be my thing. But when the gym was teaching me how to sell personal training packages, I had an aha moment. I realized, oh, these strategies that they're teaching me can be used to sell anything, including my art. So that was over 25 years ago. And now I help other artists build their 6-figure art businesses.
And so what are some of the ways that you do that? Because I think that's really interesting, because I'm an artist as well, even though in my business, it's not necessarily the business of selling art. Although I did try to set up an online art store, but being a human design projector, I'm horrible at self-promotion. So I just fell down when it came to all that. So that's why I'm very excited about reading your book, because it may give me some additional insights. Because I always get asked, Terry, do you sell your paintings? And I'm like, well, and I stumble all over it, because whenever I had that up and I was like, yeah, I sell them, they're like, oh, they're really pretty. And then they'd leave. So there was a lot of gaps in how I marketed my artwork, and a lot of it had to do with like my energy about it and the vibrational kind of like output I was doing. Plus, I hated the whole marketing and self promotion. Even in my regular business, Better 3, I resist that. So, we'll unpack all that stuff as it relates to the work that you do. But tell me more specifically about those experiences. So, that's what you're doing now. And how else are you helping artists run their business?
Okay, you're right. If you come to the table with the wah, wah energy, people are not going to buy it. It doesn't matter how good your art is because what they're responding to is your, well, I don't know. And here it is. And do you like it? And what do you think? And they say it's nice. And then you don't even ask them to buy it because so that's usually the first step. And I'm sure you deal with this as well, Terry, where mindset comes in with every time you introduce strategy. So that's why throughout my book, Artpreneur, I introduce strategy and I say, oh, but what might be coming up for you right now is, and it's usually some version of that won't work for me because fill in the blank. And the problem is that the smarter you are and the more creative you are, the better you are at coming up with these stories. Notice I didn't say excuses, stories about why that specific piece of business advice won't work for you. And it's just your brain's way of keeping you safe because you've evolved for survival, not goal achievement.
When we're looking at mindset and your attitude about your business, regardless of what you're selling, and I talk about this in other episodes of this show because it's such a huge component of being a solopreneur. I'd love to get more insight into your personal experiences with that in the early days of you being on your own and really trying to figure out like where do you want to start? What kind of business do you want to do? What were some of the mindset issues that you perhaps were confronted with?
Yeah, one of the big ones that affect entrepreneurs on all levels is the concept that cheaper is easier to sell. It isn't. It absolutely isn't because buyers want things that are reassuringly expensive. So that has been a huge hurdle. That was a huge hurdle for me in the beginning when it came time to pricing my art. It continues to bite me in the butt whenever I've tried to release something for so my I have a general like admission style coaching package that's 2000 for the full year. I have another one that's 12,000 for the year. And I thought, oh, well, let me introduce something that's only $300, but teaches this one specific thing. People don't want that. They want the transformation. They don't care if they have to spend more money. People want the big transformation. They don't want the piddly stuff.
So, how did that show up in the beginning of your business? You alluded to the fact that you were kind of challenged with finding the pricing and stuff. What I'm trying to get a good understanding of is the things you've been talking about have been like, this is my business today. I teach other artists how to make a business out of their art. But when you were first starting, you were not doing that, right?
No, when I first started and I had to price a portrait, and this was in 2000, whatever, I looked around at what other people were charging.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, well, I'll charge less. That doesn't work so well, especially if you are in an industry that also the people in it also have money mindset issues. You're basically copying their money mindset issues, their scarcity mindset. And if you're pricing it lower, you're amplifying that same problem. But yes, that is how I started pricing. Now, what happened though is somebody came to me to paint her kids. And I said, and I forget, I think it was like $200 a portrait, which it's so embarrassing now when I think about it. And she ordered 3 of each child. And that's when I was like, okay, in other words, she would have spent $700 per child. And that I immediately raised my prices to that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you logicked it through. And it's interesting because I had a similar experience when I first did my big price leap was when I was transitioning from doing proposals based on an RFP for work to charging for the proposal. And the first one, when I transitioned to charging for the proposal, I charged $5,000. And that made me like have panic attacks because I went from doing them for free to charging 5 grand. And it was my boyfriend who told me, listen, we pay 30, 40, 50 grand for just an outline in the corporate world. And I'm like, well, I'm not dealing with corporate. He's like, but still, he says, you're providing a lot of value. You're laying out a strategy, you're doing assessment, you're doing research, and it's all in this proposal, but you're not even charging for it. You're giving the milk away for free. And so that was where in my business, I realized that I was leaving money on the table. I did the same thing when I first started out. I was charging hourly, like freelance, like 30 some dollars an hour when I started 20 years ago. So I get it. You look around to see what other potential customers are paying in the marketplace and you start there and then you work from that to refine it. So what were some of the stages that you went through when you started realizing I'm not charging enough and then you started changing that?
It was basically every time I had a challenge with a customer, I realized, oh, I need to tighten my contract, i.e., set boundaries, and raise my prices so I'm not resentful. Over time, that's when my prices continued to go up. My contracts got tighter, my boundaries got firmer.
And those are just by example. You were able to curate your own models and you're helping other people avoid these pitfalls
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you and I both learned as we're coming along in the
Yeah.
world. And it's interesting because sometimes you have to go through the pain yourself to
Yeah.
really anchor it. Because especially like the money mindset stuff, when your mindset is set in a certain belief pattern, regardless of where it came from, you're going to be experiencing resistance if somebody comes along and says, oh, just go ahead and start doing it this way or do it that way. You kind of have to go through that gauntlet yourself. What were some of the gauntlets that you also encountered that were learning experiences for you as you were getting more established in
Yeah.
your business?
Okay. So the pricing was number one. Each of these huge mistakes, there's 5 huge mistakes that any entrepreneur slash artist slash artpreneur is going to make. The second one is production, and that's about what you are offering. So sometimes you can fix that by, oh, just price something higher, but sometimes you can't. In the beginning, I was kind of like an art slut. You wanted me to paint something in this style? Sure, I'll do that. You want me to design your wedding invitation? Sure, I'll do that. But what happens is if you don't niche down, you become like a Target rather than a Tiffany's. Tiffany's can charge those premium prices because all they offer is jewelry. Whereas Target, you can get a soccer ball, you can get jewelry, you can get apples. That was a problem I had to overcome as well. Third problem was a tough lesson to learn, and it's still a lesson that I have to kind of unteach people what they've been told over the last few years, is about trying to do everything on social media. So the first 10 years of my business, I was doing everything by word of mouth. I didn't even have an email list. It wasn't until I tried to sell my first online art class, and this was going back 12 years, and I thought, oh, I can just post things on Instagram and people will sign up. And that was back when we had engagement on Instagram. It didn't work so well for me. So that's when I built an email list. And once I built an email list, not only was I able to fill my online art class, but I was also to sell more art. The fourth thing is promotion. And by promotion, I really mean closing sales. So for many people, and this is not just for artists, I will give the example for both artists and general entrepreneurs, they're just not asking for the sale. So another way you'll hear this put is they're not making enough offers. In the art world, it's really saying, would you like to buy this? They're not asking that question. So that closing sales is a gap that is something that you have to build that courage muscle, because a lot of us are afraid of people saying no, but you're not going to get a yes if you're too afraid of the no. And the last thing is productivity. That's about having the systems in place to make things running. And you asked me about some of my early learning mistakes, and that was trying to do everything myself. Just because you can do things doesn't mean you should be doing everything. And it's definitely not the best way to build a business.
So where did you start bringing in resources to help you in your business?
That's a great question. What I talk about in Artpreneur is hiring a business babysitter. So a business babysitter is usually a teenager, a college student that you're only paying the local babysitting rates. You bring in somebody who's young, part-time work, 10 hours a week. At first, you might not know what to give them, but over time, you get used to it and you build that delegation muscle. So now, whenever I have something and I look, well, does this even need to be done by a human? Can we automate this somehow? Then does it need to be done at all? Sometimes there's things we're doing like, oh, wait, I don't need to be doing that. And then the third question is, does this need to be done by me? And if it doesn't need to be done by me, you delegate it. I have a podcast editor, a video editor, an operations manager, customer service person. I just added a fifth person to do my social media for me because I was doing it and it was making me bonkers. And I said, look, you're going to do it now. I just felt my body felt relief. It's like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. Yes. Very nice.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to be said for forcing yourself to do something that isn't, first of all, maybe not in your wheelhouse, something you just have a disdain for. So, what was it about social media that was driving you bonkers?
It was just very time consuming. This was even using AI tools. So the thing about AI, it's kind of like shipping, where it doesn't cost a lot for me to ship something from New York City, where I live, to you, Terry, to Florida. But it might cost a lot to get something from the Fort Lauderdale airport to where you actually live. So those last miles is the most expensive part of the shipping process. And the same thing, if Tara, if you were to ship something to me, most of the shipping, like getting something from where you live from Florida to New York City, not the biggest part, but to getting something from New York City to my apartment in New York, that once you start drilling down, that's the part that's the most expensive. Now, the same thing is true of using these AI tools. They can do a lot, but it's that last mile, that last bit that needs that oversight because, oh, am I yelling at you, stupid robot? Why did you put that into this clip? This is just me talking to my podcast editor. Oh, that's a terrible headline you picked out. Why did you pick that out? So it was even with the AI tools, of course, it saved me some time, but it still needed a human to supervise it. And because I had gotten everything down to a process, that I knew what my process was, I was able to delegate it to a new person.
Got it. So, how did you find these resources that you're currently using in your 5-person team?
Okay, so my business babysitter I've had for over 10 years. So she started off at $10 an hour over 10 years ago, but she's now full time, not $10 an hour. She has a 401k. She has paid vacation. She's my full time person. She's my operations manager. Everybody else is from the Philippines, and I use onlinejobs.ph to find good talent. I interview people based on completing a test task. So, for example, to hire my video editor, I had everyone who was applying to edit a 30-second or 1-minute video clip, and they had to upload it. So, first of all, not everyone's even going to do the test task. So, that eliminates a lot of people right there. But then we can judge them based on them doing a specific task. So, that narrows the field down quite a bit. Once we hire somebody, we don't hire them full time. We give them a trial week. Sometimes if I have more than one candidate I want to try out, I will give 3 people a trial week at the same time. So that is an investment, and the trial week is paid. The test task is not, it's part of the interview process, but the trial week is paid, and that's the best way to really see how they're going to work with you. So having those things in place, having a very solid process for the interview portion to quickly eliminate the candidates from just the people who are just, yeah, I can do that even though they can't. And as well as having the trial week in place so you can really learn their communication style. The other thing that we do is that when we do have a process, we document it using either a Loom, or I go on Fathom and I teach them how to do it, and that gets recorded. And then we document that as a step-by-step process. So that way, when we do hire somebody new, they already have a library of how we like things done. So whenever we do hire somebody, we're not starting from scratch.
I'm glad that you brought that up. And having SOPs, playbooks, the kind of onboarding that you want to set these people up for success based on your experience and some of the things that you've learned and that you teach in your book and your programs. What are 3 things that you feel are most important for a freshman solopreneur to know in order to be successful and move to their 2nd, 3rd, and 5th year and so on?
So number 1 is you want to be reassuringly expensive, because cheaper is not easier to sell. Number 2, you want to sell the transformation. And number 3 would be, don't try to do it all yourself.
Yeah, and that's a good summation based on the conversation we've had. Unpack a little bit about the transformation, because that's a very broad statement and people can take that a lot of different ways. So in your business, what is that transformation that you offer from what you're selling now?
My most successful program that I sell is my Artist Incubator program, because it teaches all 5 of those areas: production, pricing, prospecting, promotion, and productivity. So that when a person comes in, they know no matter what their main problem is, they're going to get help with it. But it's not just a curriculum-based program, because people don't want curriculum-based programs anymore. They can ask ChatGPT for that help. So they want curriculum, they want coaching, and they want accountability through some form of cohort. So I offer accountability pods for my clients. So they get the transformation, because not only do they have the right strategy in place, they get the expert feedback, and they're held accountable so that they actually get results. So that's the transformation that I offer through the Artist Incubator.
And that's honestly what everybody wants. They want to get the results. And when you're presenting your offer or your services or program or what have you, and you're showing them and demonstrating that this is exactly what you're going to get versus, hey, it's more transactional, then absolutely you're going to have a lot of success. So, Miriam, it's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your models and doing a little teaching on this interview here. I really appreciate you as a guest. And I will have more information about Miriam on the show notes page. And thanks so much for listening. Well, I know you're disappointed, but that's it for this episode. Listen, the great news is there's another one coming, so stay tuned. Anyway, I just want to make sure that you do the prompt if this episode had a prompt, and you get that homework done, because you're going to be a better solopreneur. How's that for a maternal finger shaking at you? Hey, listen, thanks so much for being here, for giving me time of your day, and, for taking it on. So if you want to learn more and stay connected with me, just head on over to mysolopreneurlife.com. Thanks a bunch. See you soon. That was pretty good. I think I'll keep that one. Bye.